Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Entrepreneur. I'm just starting this YouTube channel because I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship, and I just wanted to have a space where I can just share my thoughts. These videos are going to be, very homemade. There's not going to be any editing whatsoever. It's just going to be me talking to the camera. As you see, I literally have like a $10 equipment. I'm just using like an old microphone stand to put my phone on top and just start talking. So I believe that's sort of the essence of entrepreneurship, being really resourceful and just putting your word out there. And this is hopefully a space for me to communicate with those of you who are interested in hear about stories from other entrepreneurs and who want to share different visions and sort of learn through um, different people's trajectories through entrepreneurship. And I guess, I don't have any defined structure on how to start, but I'm just going to start talking about my origins, my upbringing, sort of give a background story so that I can put everyone in context. And then I'm going to start talking about different subjects in following videos. So let's get started. So my name is Pablo Mascaretti. I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I lived there until I was like 3 years old. After that, my parents moved to the second largest city in Argentina, which is Cordoba, and I lived there almost until I was 15. Basically, during my time in Argentina, I was always very interested in entrepreneurship, and when I turned 15 years old, I had the chance to attend this event called the International Forum of Entrepreneurs. It was sort of like a local forum hosted in my city, and it was amazing because for the first time, I got to experience what entrepreneurship was. In a way, it was a place where about 1,000 young kids would just gather together and would talk about how to improve the future, and we would have activities and on how to develop sustainable solutions, and we would just interact with each other. But I guess um, I've been always interested in international cultures and global cultures, and for the first time, I had the chance to see people from all over the world. So, people from the U.S. and Brazil and Peru and other countries in Latin America came to this forum, and some Europeans as well. So it was a pretty global event, and I was able to just talk to different cultures, and I was just amazed at for the first time being able to know that there's a whole world out there, very talented people that bring in different perspectives. So I guess at a very young age, at 15, I'm 23 now. I got to discover that I was really passionate about talking to people from other cultures. I guess one thing that was in my advantage was that I was always interested in learning new languages. So by that time, I already spoke English pretty well because I had taken English throughout my entire life in school, and I spoke a little bit of French. So I could communicate with every single person, and I even had at this event I met a girl from Brazil, and because of her, I learned Portuguese at least at a beginner level, and then I was able to further learn more about the Brazilian culture as well. But essentially, after this forum passed, I always knew that I wanted this. I wanted entrepreneurship to be part of my life, sort of for the rest of my life. So fast forward, when I was 16, my parents moved to Colombia, and I had to come with them. And this was a whole different country with very with a very different culture, and it was pretty shocking to me because I had to start a new life from scratch. So it was definitely challenging because back in Argentina I had my own rock band, and I had my group of friends, and I was very comfortable. I had a really nice group of people there and family, and suddenly having to move overseas or abroad was very hard, and especially at that age, when you're a teenager, when you're 16, you've already developed your group of friends, and just having to completely switch environments was definitely challenging. But when I came to Colombia, it was obviously hard at first. Um, but after a while, I was able to make friends here, and I sort of started getting involved in different activities. I started doing jujitsu. I started, um, doing other things. I got interested in technology, and I guess the good thing was that I was able to get in a very good high school. So I enrolled at the Columbus School. So that's an American high school, and that's where I really improved my English a lot. But not only that, the thing is, finally I could go to high school where there were a lot of international people. So that was also something that really caught my attention. So back home, I used to go to a middle school or high school that was very local, and the teachers were locals as well. But when I moved to Colombia, I went to this international high school where not only the teachers were from the U.S. and Canada and some other countries, as well as Colombia, but also the students. There were some guys and girls from China and from Panama and from Brazil and from all of sort of different countries. So it was the first time where I knew that I was not the only person leaving their hometown and going abroad, but I was able to get to know other people with different international perspectives. So that was something really cool, I guess. Just being able to transition from that thing that I really wanted when I was part of this forum to a high school where I was exposed to internationals, and I was also enrolled in an American high school, so everything was taught in English. So I really got to know a lot more about the American culture, and that was very good because it led the way to the next transition in my life, which was going to the U.S. So once I graduated from high school, I went to the U.S. For for college, and I ended up going to Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. And when I got there, obviously it had been 3 years that I lived in Colombia. Now I moved to the U.S. It was a new country, and again, it was going to be a new cultural shock. So definitely not something easy to do, especially because now I was moving to a country where Spanish was not the native language, so I had to communicate in a new language. So when I got to the U.S., everything was really different. I had been to the U.S. before as a visitor, but obviously it's not the same when you're visiting than when you're living. Um, but this time, I guess it was easier for me to adapt because I already knew that I wanted to go to the U.S. Because I wanted to be in an environment that it would be even more global. And I was lucky because Purdue has a lot of international students. There's people from China, from South America, North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, from every single country you could name. So you can literally find people from everywhere. And this was something really interesting to me. That when I got there, we first had this thing called Boiler Gold Rush International. So that's like a 3 day event or sort of like boot camp where you sit down with people from from all the international students coming into the university, and you get to talk to people. So I made a couple of friends from India and from Asia, and that was sort of like a first big exposure to people from abroad. So um, after talking to these different groups of people, I realized, wow, this is awesome. I'm gonna have the chance to really be at school studying and sort of pursuing my interests, while at the same time I can be able to learn from other cultures. So I was really happy that I went to Purdue. And At first, I enrolled in a program called exploratory studies, which is interesting because I knew that I wanted to pursue something related to technology. So I wanted to do engineering. I just didn't know which one, and I wasn't very sure because I have very different interests. Interests. I'm very interested in languages and music and technology and business. There were so many things going on that I just had no clue which one I could choose. Basically, I enrolled in this program called Exploratory Studies, and it was actually pretty cool because every single class we would have kind of like assessments or tests that we would have to do. So we would have to fill in like personality tests and things. And after the class, we would get our results back, and we would have sort of like a list of the top 10 majors that we would have to choose in order to that we would have to choose because it would be good fits for us. So, in between those top 10 majors, most of them were engineering for me. But, I was not very sure because I wasn't very good at math. Like, I was okay, but I wasn't like a genius at math or physics. And, I was really interested in science, but not really just heavy on math or physics. So, I guess more than science, I was really interested in technology specifically. But I still had this dream of becoming an entrepreneur. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I didn't think that taking like doing like a business major, I would be able to pursue those interests that I had in technology. So I was considering engineering rather than business. And I guess along with that, it was a little bit of pressure from my parents that they wanted me to pursue a major that would have good job outlook, I guess, in the future. Because being an immigrant and when you're traveling to a different country, obviously it's harder when you don't really distinguish yourself from others to be able to find those opportunities abroad. So by that time I knew I wanted to do engineering. The problem was that I didn't like any of them. I was like, okay, what am I going to do now, right? I didn't really like mechanical. I thought it was too math related. I didn't really like chemical because I had no idea what chemistry. I hated chemistry too. I mean, I was not really interested in that. And I really, really like biology. I was this close to becoming a doctor, but after taking those personality tests, the results said, or the outcome was that because of my personality, that I was very outgoing, then being a physician or working at the lab was not going to work out because I'm just very social. I'm a very social guy, so sort of that was ruled out, and now I had to find which engineering I liked. So biomedical was not also not an option because it was very like lab heavy work. So now I had to sort of like navigate through, okay, what were my options. And funny enough, uh, when I was like 3 years old, I was like really obsessed both with dinosaurs and with planets. I was really interested in space. It's just that back home in Argentina, there we didn't really have a lot of influence from sort of like the space industry. We would only get like science fiction movies, but it's not as advanced as in the U.S. where there's NASA and there's like programs for kids and stuff. So I knew that that world was out there. I was just not very conscious about it or aware. Um, and being at Purdue, I was exposed to a lot of like space fairs and sort of like demonstrations of like space technology and cool stuff while I was a freshman. And I started thinking like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. And what I liked about space engineering was that um, the sort of so not only Purdue was a really good school in aerospace engineering, but also what I liked about that major is that it was very innovative compared to other types of engineering. So the way I saw it was, if you're doing mechanical, most of the problems you're going to solve they're already defined. But when you're doing space and you're sort of trying to get to a new planet or sort of mine an asteroid or do anything, you're going to have to innovate a way to create a solution for whatever you're doing. So I thought it was very cool because I was going to be able to sort of create new technologies for the space exploration. Um, And I guess that's where my interest sparked. Just being at the university. So just being there in the first place was a really good thing. So once I started talking to people and just learning about what majors were out there and sort of what other engineering majors people were doing, I realized that aerospace could be an option. So after doing this program in exploratory studies, the teacher told us, okay, out of your top three choices for engineering, which for me were I think aerospace, electrical, and I think mechanical. I'm not very sure, or like sound engineering or something. I don't really remember which was the third option. But basically, he said, just pick one of those top three and try to talk to people in the field who can tell you what the day to day is like. Um, so long story short, I started just sending emails to everyone I could find. But most importantly, and this was kind of like the beginning of how to become an entrepreneur, it was trying to find those resources by myself. So I sat down and I actually went to NASA's directory and I started looking at different people there. And I thought, wait a second, well, what if there's anyone from Argentina working on NASA? Might as well just email them and ask them what is it that they're doing and how they got there in the first place. So I found two guys, Pablo de Leon and Miguel de San Martin, and these two guys were from Argentina, and they had been working at NASA for a while, for almost 20 years. And these guys are bright engineers who still work at NASA on very cool projects. So one of them develops the spacesuits that astronauts used, and he was a pioneer in this field. And when he was a child, he decided he wanted to do this, so he moved to the U.S. and started working on this spacesuits, and then NASA hired him. So he's sort of like the lead developer of spacesuits, and he's also a professor at a university. So a very cool guy. I What I did was I actually bought his books. So I read a couple of books that he had wrote about the space industry in Argentina, and after learning more about his job and sort of what he does, I was lucky because I could see his email attached in the back of the book where he said, if you guys have any questions, please email me and we can talk. So that's what I did, and we talked for a little bit, and then he told me about his story, and now I was hyped as hell. So I was like super interested in trying to talk to more people at NASA and just learning more about the space industry. I guess I was just really happy that everyone at NASA, even though they're super busy, they were willing to talk to me. So the next I talked to the other guy, and his story was also pretty cool. He's from a little town in Argentina, and when he was little, he would work at the countryside, and he would hear the radio where he heard like the space missions going on, and how men went to the moon, and he got really inspired, and that's why that's how he got a scholarship, and he moved to the U.S. And after sort of spending a lot of time there, he was able to go to MIT and specialize in aerospace engineering, and then he started working at NASA, and he's actually the co-inventor of something called the sky crane maneuver. So for those of you guys who know what the Mars rover is, and the Mars rover is just a little robot that's uh, sort of um, moving around in the Martian surface, looking for minerals and other forms of life too. Uh, he invented something which is crazy, which is the sky crane maneuver, and that's sort of like a way to deploy this robot when you're landing to Mars, and how it lands. It basically has like a jetpack with ropes, and it's all crazy engineering behind it, and he was the chief engineer of this mission. So I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then after talking to these two guys, I talked to another guy called David Green, and he worked for the space for the SLS, or the space launcher for the space shuttle. And but this last guy, he was American. He is American, and we talked over the phone, and he told me about his story and how aerospace was really cool, and then he saw, well, actually all of them saw that there was going to be a lot of potential in the future for space engineers. So by this time, I was already sort of convinced that this was a very cool major, and I wanted to enroll in it. So I did. I got into aerospace engineering, but you know, um, when before enrolling in this major, I still wasn't very sure because I was not very good at math or physics. So I didn't really know if I was going to do well. But I started working on it, and sort of, I guess, when I was already a sophomore, and after taking a bunch of classes, I really liked my major, and I thought it was very cool. But I just felt that there was something missing. I felt like I was doing too much of technical work, but I was not really doing any entrepreneurship or business stuff. And we had, like, the major was only about like math and physics and aerodynamics and propulsion and all that stuff that's very cool, but nothing related to business or sort of starting a company or starting a space mission or something like that. So when I was a sophomore, I talked to one of these guys from NASA, one of the two Argentinians, and after chatting for a while, I told him, I want to do aerospace because I want to build space companies, not because I want to build a rocket myself. I don't want to be the engineer doing the rocket. I want to be the person who gathers a team to build a successful space company. And one very funny thing he told me was that when he was in college, he was interested in business. So he took a couple of economics classes, which he thought were easy after having all of the math background from aerospace, and he suggested for me to take some of those economics classes. So I had always been interested in economics and business. I had read multiple books, and I got online and just started looking at the different programs offered by the university, and I realized that if I took economics as my second major, I would only have to stay for an extra semester, so I could do a double major in 4.5 years, which was extremely convenient because I was basically getting two college degrees that take 4 years to achieve in basically half the time. And so, you know, I took sort of that semester to think about why I wanted to combine both things. I still wasn't very sure because the workload was going to be insane. And I still, enrolled in economics. So now I was doing a double major in aerospace engineering and economics. Um, but sort of going back, and sorry, this is not in chronological order. I'm just, thinking onto my head. Um, I guess what finally inspired me to take these two majors was that I had always been sort of, so I was always interested in space and space companies. And when I was doing aerospace, I started reading a lot about the industry, and the only company that was innovating and pushing new space products into market was SpaceX. So after reading a little bit about SpaceX, not only I realized that it was going to be possible in the future to start a space company, but also that there were very talented entrepreneurs that were pushing for the space industry to improve. And funny thing that the guy who was behind SpaceX at that time, and this was like 5 years ago, when SpaceX wasn't really like super well known. They were like relatively well known, but not as much as they are today. The mind behind so much innovation was Elon Musk. So I started reading more about this guy, and I bought the book and read his biography. So I read a lot of books, and I just read about him, and I just couldn't believe how that the resemblance between him and I was uncanny. We had very similar backgrounds. He obviously, I'm not nearly as smart or talented or hardworking as Elon, but but this guy, had a similar background in the sense that he lived in South Africa when he was little. So he was born in a sort of uh, underdeveloped country compared to the U.S. And he was always very interested in technology. And after being born in South Africa, which is actually a country that's very similar to Argentina in many things, such as weather, some cultural things, some history, since those two are countries formed by immigrants and conquerors. And it's they those two countries are just relatively similar. Even though Argentina was conquered by Spain and South Africa was conquered by England. They still have sort of similar backgrounds where there were a lot of mix of cultures, and they are underdeveloped countries compared to first world countries. So it's interesting that he also was an immigrant, and he is today one of the most successful global entrepreneurs in the world. So Elon um, moved from South Africa to Canada first, and then because I think his mom was Canadian, and after getting his Canadian citizenship, he was able to go to the U.S. And he double majored in physics and economics. I think. So after reading this, I was really, really interested because I realized that one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world was an immigrant from a very similar country, very similar conditions, and he was doing. He had very similar interests too by doing aerospace or physics and economics. And I started reading a lot more about him, and then I realized that he was also the founder of Tesla and the CEO. And I just, by really reading about him, I realized that having these two tools, or sort of like being able to bridge the gap between business and technology, is something really, really powerful that not a lot of people have. And I knew that I was also very talented at doing that because I'm very social. I really understand human dynamics very well in business and sort of like patterns. But I was also good at engineering and technology and being able to integrate those two things together. So, I'm not going to talk more about Elon, maybe in a later episode, but essentially, after reading a lot about him, he sort of became my idol. He became a hero to me. And I decided, what, let's just pursue this and let's just do this double major and become really good at technology and business altogether. Um, so once I started doing both majors, I at the same time I was really pressured by schoolwork. Uh, it was definitely very challenging because I was a guy who was really used to like going out with people and partying and sort of being at social reunions and whatnot. But in school, I actually had to sit down and focus, and also because for internationals, just tuition in the U.S. is insanely expensive. So I knew that my parents were working really hard to be able to pay for my college tuition and my education, and I just had to sort of like do well um, to show gratitude towards what they were doing for me. So I guess no, junior year was very challenging. That's when aerospace got really technical and really hard. Economics also got brutal. I had lots of assignments, and literally there was a semester where I pretty much just never left the library. I sat down and I was just grinding for like 14 hours every single day. I would just go to the library at 8 a.m. after getting breakfast, and then I would leave the library at like 1 a.m. Sometimes even 3 a.m. I would just stay there forever, studying and work on assignments. But it was good because for the first time I was pressured by an outside force to sit down and really grind. But and the thing is, obviously when you do it once, it's challenging. But the hard thing is to do it consistently. So for if you do it for like 4 months, every single day, at one point you start becoming a machine. So I started being able to absorb a lot of information really fast and just process things and do assignments and just putting a lot of hours into work. And I guess junior year was very important to me because I was able to really learn the discipline of sitting down and studying, and that's where a lot of people struggle with that. Um, but let's see, the I guess when you know all of that discipline was backed by my background as well. Just being able to constantly adapt to new environments. I guess that sort of translates to learning new academic things that are different because engineering and economics are very different. But I was already sort of prepared to adapt to those changes because I had lived in different countries. I think in a way it relates to that. But also because when I was little, I did karate for like 8 years straight. So I already had the discipline because my parents told me that one of the most important things in life is to be disciplined and persistent. And that holds absolutely true today. I guess the fact that I was able to do martial arts for 8 years really helped me in being able to have the capacity to sit down and just study for long hours. And the as I kept working, uh, I realized that now I had to put engineering and economics into practice because books are cool and just learning new theories and new equations is very cool. But I needed that practicality to be able to learn from more of a hands-on experience and not from books. So that's why I decided to enroll at the Entrepreneurship Center at Purdue University. So I enrolled at this Entrepreneurship Center, and initially I had an idea that was very similar to the way Uber Eats works today before Uber Eats was launched. But instead of just doing it for food, I thought I wanted to create like an on-campus delivery system for any item. So let's say you were taking a test and you need a calculator, you could just take your phone out and request through the app for someone to bring the calculator to you. So I sort of enrolled in this entrepreneurship center um, to pursue this idea initially, and it didn't work out because I just didn't know how to materialize the idea and I struggled with defining the concept, so I just let it go. But it was important to me because for the first time I had the opportunity to go through a market validation workshop where I was able to talk to customers and refine the idea. So I talked to a couple of people asking, if you had an exam and you had to ask for a calculator, would you use this app? People said yes. I thought that was a cool concept, but I just left it at that as a concept. Um, and after that, mm, I was still a junior, and then I had a new idea, which was my next company. So um, I think I've already talked for a while today, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. The next video is gonna be about how I started my first company and what it was about, and sort of link it back to all this origin story, which I thought was gonna be important to give you this background so that you guys could better understand how I became a global entrepreneur or a global entrepreneur, just like the channel, and how I was able to start this company while I was in school, and how I applied my two majors to building a company, and how you guys, even though you might be entrepreneurs from anywhere in the world, you can use the tools that you learn at school or by yourself to create new projects that you're interested in. So without much further ado, thank you everyone. This I'm just gonna end it now, and if you have questions, please just write in the comment section and subscribe to this new channel, and I'm gonna take your questions. So thanks.